What's up everyone, Zachary Seif here, and today we're going to talk about why some effects sound different in front of an amplifier versus in the effects loop of an amplifier. So one of the biggest advantages to running 4-cable method with any of your tube amps is the fact that you can control your amp, your effects, your channel switching, whatever you want, using your modeling unit or multi-effects processor. So today we're going to use my Axe-Fx 3, where I have 3 of my outputs being used and 2 of my inputs being used. Input 1 is my guitar straight into the Axe-Fx. Right, I can just play my guitar as is with this, be totally set to go. And then we're coming out of output 3, and output 3 of the fractal is going into the front of my Mesa Boogie. So as if I'm just using the Axe-Fx as a regular stomp box pedal, guitar into the fractal, fractal into the amp. And I could run my entire signal chain like this and be totally fine. But then I have input 3 on the fractal, which is coming from the effects loop send from the Mesa. So now the Mesa is sending my Axe-Fx a signal, and I can add more effects into output 4 over here on the fractal, which is going into the effects loop return of the Mesa. So just like I'm running a traditional delay pedal, right, from the loop of the amp into the pedal, from the pedal back into the loop. And again, the whole point of 4-cable method is I can put some of my effects pedals in front of the amp to affect the preamp, and the rest of my pedals in the effects loop, which affects the amp after the gain staging, right? And here's why we want to do that. So here's my basic clean signal. Help if I turn the amp off as standby. Here's my basic clean signal. And let's say I want to add some chorus. So I can add it up front, or I can add it in the loop. It really depends on how you have everything set up. Mix is very important. When you're running into the front of an amplifier, the higher the mix, the more prominent, the tone is going to be. And in the loop, generally you want a slightly lower mix. Otherwise, it can kind of get a little convoluted. So we're going to hear what it sounds like when I use my chorus in the front versus in the loop. So this is what it sounds like in front. And in the loop. So to me, you have a little bit more definition when it's in the loop, because you're blending it in with your dry signal, and it's after the gain staging, so the level of the pedal doesn't affect how much signal is going into the front of the amp. I'm still getting the same basic signal going into the front of the amp, and it's modulating or affecting what's going on after it hits the amp. So that's where I kind of stand with modulation effects, is I tend to run them in the loop for the most part, just because I want to have as clear of a signal going into the amp as possible. However, there are some effects that don't really work as well in the loop, like the phaser. I always run that in front. Right, to get that classic kind of swooping in and out sound. Phasers don't tend to work as well in the loop, in my opinion. I'm going to put a copy of my phaser in the loop and you can hear it real quick. So it's still there, but it's kind of swooping the full signal of the amp. So it's not the same exact interaction. And again, I'm not sure how well you guys can hear the difference right now as I'm filming and recording this, because I'm hearing everything in the room. But in post, I'll be able to kind of hear and kind of adjust my thoughts from there. So again, phaser in the loop. Versus phaser in front. So right off the bat, the phaser in the loop, because it's phasing the entire preamp signal, you get a little bit more bite and chime from it whereas in the front it's a little bit more subtle because it's only affecting the dry signal of the guitar. So it's a tonal difference, and it's also a little bit of a feel difference as well while playing. Delay is another effect that is drastically different in the front of the amp versus the loop. So I usually run my delays in the loop because you get very clear and clean repeats. Versus in front of the amp, it's going to be a little bit more prominent at the same level and the same mix, and your repeats have a tendency to kind of mush into each other, which some people like. Right, the delays are a little louder, more prominent, and they kind of blend into each other versus being a little bit more separate and clear. And again, it really depends on the vibe that you're going for. So let's switch over to a gain channel where you can hear some of these other differences a bit more prominently. Alright, so now we're on my crunch channel. And I run everything pretty much straight up, straightforward. So we have the same effects that I was just using on the clean channel. You'll notice that there's a little bit of my signal chain that goes to output 1 that's not going to output 4, right? And there are a couple graphic delays, a cab lock, and the delay. And again, we already know that this is the part of the signal chain that goes back into the fractal and into my interface if I want to record directly. So what we have here is the graphic EQ that looks very similar to the Mesa graphic EQ that's on the amp, and that is because the Mesa graphic EQ is post effects loop. That means that if you use the effects loop with your Mesa Mark Series amplifier, you will not hear the 5-band EQ. You have to get that somewhere else, and considering it's such an integral part of the tone, I have it copied here in the fractal so that I can get the benefits of the 5-band EQ without any additional gears, just the fractal. But keep that in mind, that your 5-band EQ does not affect your effects loop return signal. So if you're coming back into a modeling unit or interface after the effects loop, you're not going to hear your 5-band EQ. You will hear it if you use the cab clone DI out, or if you use something like the 2 Notes Torpedo Captor X. You'll hear it because that's coming from the speaker output. So again, the only way that you're going to hear your Mesa 5-band EQ is if you're taking the signal from the speaker or the cab clone or the, they call it the slave out, the output that allows you to copy that signal into another power amp. So without the 5-band EQ, it sounds like this through the fractal. And with it, drastic difference. The cabs that we're using are the same cabs that I use in my live guitar tone video, which if you haven't checked that out yet, it's in one of these corners up here. 2 Mesa style 4x12s, 2 different microphones, an SM7 and a Royer 121, high cuts and low cuts. And we're running a stereo delay, which is why the signal is coming through so thick and full, right? If I turn that off real quick, it'll sum up back to mono. And back on. So, sounds really cool in the room. Very impractical live, especially since most front of house mixes are summed to mono anyway. But when you're at home, it sounds pretty cool. So let's run some of these effects now through the front and the effects loop return. So chorus I would run in the loop, otherwise it just kind of gets a little too dark and muddy up front and you get more note separation in the loop. As far as delay goes, it depends on what you're trying to do. If I'm going for a lead tone, it's got to be in the loop so that it doesn't muddy my signal. But in the front, they're more prominent and more loud. And if you're going for kind of that dotted eighth galloping U2 style delay, it sounds great up front. Just remember that your repeats are going to be competing for the same volume as your dry signal, and it can kind of muddy up your signal depending on how much delay you have going through. So what about a boost? Well, if I put the boost in front, it's just going to add more preamp distortion. So here it is by itself. And with the filter block. It's essentially adding 3 dB of gain, 3 dB of volume. Whereas in the loop, it's going to act as a volume boost, which is what I want it to do. So let me turn off the block that I have here. And I'm going to play it without and then with, and you're going to notice an immediate jump in volume. So again, with adding volume and gain, if you put it in the front, it's going to add preamp volume, right? Gain, distortion. If you put it in the loop, it's going to add master volume or make your master volume louder. So again, depends on the purpose that you want to achieve. Phaser, I always run the phaser in front, and here's why. When you run it in front, you get that classic Van Halen. Classic eruption sweep. When you run it in the loop, you hear how it sounds very fizzy and muddy? It's because it's phasing your entire preamp signal and not just your dry guitar signal. So it's affecting a lot of your signal chain and creating, in my opinion, a very unpleasant sound. So I always run phasers in the front. Same thing with the flanger. I don't use the flanger for anything live, but I would run it in the loop if I was still using one. So that's how all these different effects sound in the loop. And that's why I love the 4-cable method so much, because I can make my signal exactly what I want it to be and nothing more. And to end today, I'm going to play just a little bit of one of my favorite tones that I have here in the fractal. Hope you guys enjoy. That just about wraps up today's video. I hope you guys had a blast checking out how I use 4-cable method so that I can use my Fractal Audio Axe FX3 and my wonderful Mesa Boogie JP2C amp at the exact same time. Let me know if you're running 4-cable method of any kind in the comments below. Let me know what kind of signal chain you guys use, what kind of different methods you use, and we'll just kind of expand our overall knowledge on using 4-cable method with our pieces of gear. Hit that subscribe button. According to my analytics, 90% of you who watch my videos are not subscribed. Take 2 seconds, hit that button. You're already in the video. You might as well do that real quick. Check me out on social media. All of those applicable links are down below. Until next time, everyone, keep on rocking and stay safe.